Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for what is going to be a really lovely event and chance to catch up with some of the alumni from the 2019 Engelsberg Summer School in Classical Architecture. So I'm really pleased to have this group of alumni here with us today. I'm also really pleased because I'm actually in our office, and so is my colleague Jules, who's going to be joining the event in a little bit to field some questions to our five alumni. So just to say very briefly, I think we're really amongst friends today, so there probably isn't anyone here who hasn't come across either INTBAU or the summer school, but just to very briefly say, INTBAU is a global network dedicated to creating better places to live through traditional building, architecture and urbanism. And we're very proud of the Engelsberg Summer School as one of our key initiatives to increase and improve access to traditional architectural education around the world. So this group of five really fantastic alumni who are joining us today from five very different parts of the world to share a little bit about what has been going on with them since July 2019. So really without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Morgan Schwab, who is our colleague at the Axel Johnson Foundation and the other key partner on the summer school, to tell us a little bit more about today's event. Morgan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. I'm just going to share a few slides, quickly run you through. My name is Morgan, and I'm a portfolio coordinator and project leader at the Axel and Margaret Axel Johnson Foundation in Sweden. And I work for the Urban City Research Department in particular, which is a program that is there to fund research and generate knowledge centered around the humane city. So how to build cities for people, really. So our projects span across many different areas. And of course, education has been an important focus. So one of our main projects has been the Engelsberg Summer School in Classical Architecture, which was started in 2016 with INTBAU. And really with the purpose to offer an education that we knew was not available at most architecture schools. So every year we've had 25 students from all around the world who come to the Engelsberg Ironworks, which is our facility in Sweden, just a little north of Stockholm. And over the course of 4 weeks, students learn and apply the fundamentals of architecture through various hand drawing exercises, study visits, and lectures led by leading practitioners in the field. And so in 2019, students designed buildings proposals for new buildings on existing sites and for new buildings to replace existing buildings in the Swedish city of Borlänge, which is just a little north of the Engelsberg Ironworks. And they really produced fantastic work that year. And so their work was initially intended to be displayed at the Museum of Borlänge. But 2020 being 2020, we unfortunately had to resolve ourselves to build a virtual exhibition. So we will launch the exhibition Learnings from Borlänge next week, and we'll be sending you links as well. And last announcement, the directors of the school, Jenny Bevan and Christopher Liberatos, really took students' projects one step further and actually incorporated their work into a new master plan proposal for the citizens of Borlänge. And all of this can be found in a publication that is now in print called Building a More Beautiful Borlänge, and we'll have this available also early in December. So really exciting things ahead, and really looking forward to hear what our students have to say, well, alumni, should I say, 1 year after attending the summer school. So if you have any questions about the publication or the exhibition or the school, you're welcome to send me an email. And I will leave the floor to our students. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan, and good day, or should I say good night to everyone. My name is Alex Dowthwaite, and I'm here suffering the usual plight of Australians when addressing the land we call overseas, and that I'm coming to you from around 1 a.m. on a Friday evening. But thankfully, the subject of Engelsberg is worth it. So yeah, Engelsberg. I first heard about Engelsberg and the summer school through joining INTBAU Australia as a kind of necessary catharsis during my university studies, which was spent, largely like so many others in kind of strange cantilevered concrete classrooms, conducting the usual sort of Bauhaus exercises of scrunching up and folding bits of paper in order to generate the sort of innovative and interesting forms our buildings would take for the semester, and all those sorts of enjoyable activities. But despite such entertaining distractions, my eye was always nevertheless drawn out to the sort of double glazed windows of my school building, to the beautiful and nuanced and lovely classical facades that my university had all around, and had somehow been sort of spared the march of progress. They always seemed somehow to me just sort of more substantial than the pieces of newspaper that I had on my desk. But it was around then that I realised that perhaps my architectural education as it was going was not going to be entirely comprehensive and include these sorts of traditional elements. So I thought I'd better go and seek that knowledge elsewhere. So the challenge that's posed to any student who has such a sort of contrasting experience is how to do that, how to overcome those bits of torn paper and the sort of the turtlenecked homogeny of much of the architectural academy as it is today, and sort of reclaim that knowledge that's required to build in a way that is sort of respectful of those classical facades that I so liked. So there's a few ways to try and do that. You can try and sort of hunt through obscure pattern books and Renaissance sort of treaties and try and reconstruct your knowledge like that if you like. But above all, the best way to do it is to attend the Engelsberg Summer School of Classical Architecture, of course, which is by far the richest and most exciting, knowledgeable way to learn the practice of classical architecture. Because there's a thing about classical architecture is really that the tools that are required to practice it to a pretty high standard are actually quite simple. You just need someone to tell you how to do it. So the metaphor that I would use is just like with the tools required to play the violin. You've got the hand positions, the understanding of the proportions between notes and scales and chords and all that sort of thing. You can construct anything from Mary Had a Little Lamb up to Schubert's Eighth Symphony or something. It's the same thing with classical architecture. The fundamental tools of the classical orders allow anyone really to pick up the metaphorical architectural violin and start creating music rather than noise, and with all the creativity that music entails. So Engelsberg and the brilliant tutors there all gave myself and my class really the most solid footing you can get today in those fundamental tools. Really an essential understanding of the classical orders of architecture, which are the foundation of all European and in fact global architecture for thousands of years. And it's knowledge that's never going to be irrelevant or pastiche, but is as eternal as the physical laws of the universe, to be a bit dramatic about it. So it might sound far-fetched that the quantity of knowledge, that sort of quantity of knowledge can be condensed into a month's course, without even mentioning the time spent swimming in the lakes, enjoying the saunas, the wine and the cheese, and of course the Swedish summer countryside. And of course, all of that knowledge isn't contained in that month, but what is the method, really the tools by which you and anyone can access and practice 5,000 years of building knowledge. So as our dear tutors Christopher and Jenny would say, of some lovely building or other in Stockholm or Borlänge or this one in Copenhagen, it's nothing special, it's just perfect. And Engelsberg really teaches you to make buildings that are just that. So in my career since, which has only really been possible thanks to going to Engelsberg and some very good people, I've really tried to bring these ideas back to Australia, back to the Antipodes. And I'm now project coordinator at the Prince's Trust Australia and deputy chair of INTBAU Australia, as well as contracting regularly for Australia's only classically trained architect, MJ Sutty. In these roles, I've been very fortunate in being able to work on some really great projects. I'll just give you a quick summary of a few examples of some of those. So in the inner city suburb of Glebe in Sydney, I'm working directly with the New South Wales state government and JPW architects to design the Prince's Quarter, which is a mid-rise development that uses the style of 19th century classical wool stores to incorporate social, affordable and private dwellings, as well as 5 traditional Victorian style terraces. So these are very preliminary renders at this stage, but we are heading towards a development application, and these will be updated shortly. But through Engelsberg and the experience we've had there, the design is now including things like moulded brick cornices, string courses, heavy masonry arches, and a properly composed brick facade that's tied into an entirely CLT frame structure above ground level. And that's, yeah, those details are something that I wouldn't have been able to incorporate if it wasn't for going to Engelsberg. So over in Kangaroo Island as well, in South Australia, I'm currently enjoying designing a renovation and extension of a community hall at Stokes Bay, which was sadly extensively damaged in the last bushfire season down here in Australia. So in this role, I was able to conduct a BIMBY community consultation session with the community there, and we've been able to work directly with them to develop up a design towards a practical building which serves the community's needs, but while also reflecting their identity in the traditional sort of Australian vernacular down on the island. That of course includes a barbecue pavilion, very necessary. So carrying on from what I've learned from Engelsberg, we'll also soon be announcing a partnership with a major Australian university, in which we'll be holding a 2-week traditional architecture, design and trades course that'll reintroduce students to the best of Australian architectural and building traditions, from classicism through to hands-on stonemasonry, timber working and regional traditions as well, for the first time in really half a century. And then, of course, there's the Prince's Terraces in Adelaide, which is a development that achieved the first 6-star Green Star rating for a residential development in Australia, which uses the traditional typology of the terrace house. The design for this was largely completed before my time, but I have been able to do some good work on them nonetheless. And I know from personal experience now that the residents all absolutely love it there. So since Engelsberg, really had the privilege of working on a whole range of projects, from building tiny houses to proposals for pavilions at Perth Cathedral with MJ Suddy Architects, addressing planners of the Planning Institute of Australia, and even working on sort of natural environment restoration projects. So it's been an absolutely amazing privilege in only the last year to be able to do these things. And it was only really possible because of the solid grounding in the classical language that I and all of us really gained at Engelsberg. So yeah, again, thank you to INTBAU, to the Axon Johnson Foundation, and most of all to our tutors, especially Christopher and Jenny, for really reconnecting us with our patrimony. It's great. So thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. All right. My name is Talia Walker, if some of you don't know. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, United States, of course. And just giving a short glimpse of my journey, my original background is in manufacturing engineering. And just in 2018, I went to the College of Charleston for my master's degree in community planning, policy, and design, which involved real estate, all policies, architecture designing, urban planning, urban designing. So each semester was something different for me, along with something new. So entering the Engelsberg program was the best experience I could have with architecture. It was very interesting, and I learned a lot professionally and personally. So just to get into it a bit. So firstly, I began to get interested in architecture by just my hometown in general, because in Newark, New Jersey, there are a lot of historical buildings that a lot of people don't pay attention to. And currently, in the past, I would say 40, 50 years, my city has not been utilizing these buildings as they should have. So currently the mayor has put a new law in place to where as though all of these historical buildings are now being renovated. Just for instance, for this first one, the Haynes and Company building, it was previously the first commercial building in Newark, New Jersey, served as a department store, and it was left vacant for over 30 years. And within the past 2 to 3 years, it's now been renovated to educational spaces, residential, commercial. You have Whole Foods at the ground floor. You have also a lot of chain restaurants, so it's been a good use to our downtown city, along with our Essex County Courthouse, which is a beautiful landmark, which is in the center of the city, at center of downtown as you're going, you know, towards Penn Station and going towards New York. Is directly in the center. And as you can see, the columns just speak for itself. But it was built in 1904 and is on the National Register for Historical Places. And it was a modern Renaissance structure built by Cass Gilbert. And it also has a central rotunda, which is from ground to roof, and it receives that natural light, of course, and it's smaller domes on the north and south of the actual building. And then we have the Newark's Public Library, which was one of my presidents for our last building because I just fell in love with it. This building actually was built in 1846, and it was made up of brick and the Indiana limestone. And to me, it's symbolic because it's, when you go in the inside, it's just, I'm in love with arches. And that's really what's in that building. Arches, columns, and it gives you the museum feeling as soon as you walk in, and it gives you a feeling of a different space when you actually go into the rooms. And as you can see, the last picture, the skylight, it's just a beautiful place. And even when it comes to the exterior of it, what I was looking forward to when we were designing our buildings as well, far as giving that ground and upper difference, including, you know, describing what's in the building. As you can see on the top a little bit, it has science, math, psychology, just indicating that it is a library. And then the last building that also inspired me, which is currently in renovation, is the Kruger Scott Mansion. That mansion also has been vacant for over 50 years. And it originally, well, later down the line, it was owned by the first Black millionaire in Newark, New Jersey, and she was a Black woman. And it was made up of a beauty school along with residents at the top, and it was a 6-story building. And currently they're, of course, keeping that building because it's in a historical landmark, but they're adding an additional portion, which is going to include event space, residential parking, and also spaces for up and coming entrepreneurs so that they can have their own offices, which will be included with the tenants. So they pay a round of one amount and they have access to all of those spaces in both buildings, which I think my city needs because, like I said, the mayors and the city itself, they have not been utilizing what we can offer and have not been more so for the people and making it feasible and affordable. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm planning on contacting the developers to see how I can get involved because I'm really excited about that project. And going to, well, in the midst of the summer of the Engelsberg trip, I was actually doing this project as well. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but here in the States, it was a lot of controversy about structures of, how can I say this? A lot of structures that was reminded of history and slaves and white supremacists. It was a lot of controversy going on in the past year. And in a lot of states, these structures were taken down because a lot of people began to feel that they weren't serving the purpose any longer. And in Charleston, South Carolina, this was one of the statues that was taken down, the John C. Calhoun Monument in Marion Square. And this statue stands 115 feet tall. Previously, it stood, I believe, about 20 feet, but the individuals in Charleston, South Carolina, especially the African Americans, they were upset that that monument was standing the way that it was, and they began to demolish it. And the city raised it that high so that the structure couldn't be demolished. So this statue was directly looking over the entire downtown, and you can see it from miles and miles away. And I linked up with my team, Robert, Hope, Cal, and Emily. They all were from Stanford University, a journalist and engineers, and they wanted me to help them create a monument to distinguish between the reality of African Americans and what John C. Calhoun represented. And it's a monument of Denmark Vesey that stands in a park about 10 miles from Marion Square. And the monument is about 10 feet. And a lot of people, of course, especially African Americans, Vesey was a very, he was one of the top African Americans who actually helped Black people get property in Charleston, helped free some slaves. So they felt like if you're going to do a John C. Calhoun monument 115 tall, you should do the same for him because he was symbolic for us. So as you can see, the before, that was the very start. And after going along and finishing in summer of 19, we ended up with the brick monument here. And it was an app created. So at the very top in that park, you can see 1, 2, 3 is where each of the monuments was set. So the app was created in sections. So you have chapter 1, 2, and 3. And each chapter, you had individuals of Charleston, South Carolina, speaking of their experiences of how these monuments affected everyone in the city. And it was a virtual app that was built. So the engineers built this app, and every time you go to each of these locations, you were able to, press the chapters, press the bubbles, and you were hear the speakers speak, and they would speak about basically how they were affected. So my portion of the monument was the very last portion, and each time you press a chain, each of them break, and they were going for how is the cycle being broken. They wanted the cycle to be broken because they seen how much it was affecting African Americans, and nobody was doing anything about it. So they wanted to see how they can break that cycle and try to bring something visual for people to see. And within the second chapter, each time that you pressed a bubble when you're viewing the app, the Denmark Vesey statue actually get tall as the John C. Calhoun. But the difference was the John C. Calhoun monument actually looked down on the city, and the Vesey monument didn't. It was more direct. And a lot of people were excited to see that because, again, he was one of the special people of this town. And within the third monument, with every chain breaking, and the hand symbolized the hands of the African Americans who built basically downtown Charleston. If you guys ever visit or have visited, some of the bricks and cobblestones, you can actually still see fingerprints of the slaves who built half of these buildings. So they wanted to put everything, a symbol to everything that they did. So I tried my best to make that happen for them. And it was actually a successful project. Not only did the speakers come down, but, random people in Charleston that was visiting in the park actually got the chance to see the app and actually fell in love with it. And for a moment, some of the Gullah Geechee Society, they were actually thinking about doing this as a permanent view. And I say that because, again, Charleston is one of those places that, imported slaves and don't really pay homage to what the African community do within that city previously and now. So this was very symbolic for me and the individuals in Charleston, South Carolina. And coming to chapter 2, the best experience I had by far. This was one of the most unique learning experiences ever for me. And I say that because this program taught me about time management, about not, rushing. Yes, everything has to be accurate and precise, but it was the experience and the ability and getting that one-on-one connection with the students, tutors, the visitors, literally everyone. With this being my first time actually going into architecture, because my background is not in this at all. So I was very skeptical and scared about joining the program. My director of my master's program, Richard Gilmore, actually introduced this to me. He sent the email out to, everyone from Jenny and Christopher. And he was just like, you've been saying you wanted to get into architecture because we took a class on it. And, here in the States, I can say architecture is a bit different. And with the program being so short, we didn't do as much drafting and hand drawing. We were doing more technology than anything. And that's the opposite of what I wanted to learn. So he kept, saying, I think you should do it. I think you should do it. And Jenny and Christopher actually talked me into it. And I'm glad they did, because this was like literally the best experience I had. And since then, I've been trying to draw columns, and my classmates know it was the hardest thing for me, but I've been trying. And there's just, simple drawings that we did that, inspired me to understand how hard but classical it is. And from these experiences that I had, I got offered a lot of positions with partnering with different people. And one of the alumni from College of Charleston, after he seen my drawings and it was being shared on Facebook, he actually asked me to partner with him doing another monument for the Gullah Geechee Society, because with Charleston building another portion of one of their coliseums, remains were found from slaves. And the Gullah Geechee Society had an entire memorial for them, and they wanted a monument built for them. And he asked me to partner. So this program has opened so many doors for me. It also made me look at architecture 100% differently, understanding the do's and don'ts and understanding, materials, widths, lengths, literally everything. I look at buildings so much different. And even in my hometown, I'm starting to notice a lot more things that I didn't notice before, even when it comes down to our historical landmarks. Some things I didn't notice. You're just, in the area all the time, and you don't see nothing to it because you see it every day. So that has taught me a lot. And again, just as Alex said, I greatly appreciate this experience. And it even led me to my thesis for my graduate program, which again, I just always like to, not always, but one of my first priorities is to give back to my hometown, because I know there has been a struggle here with connections of different neighborhoods and the neglect different neighborhood has had over the past years. And my entire thesis was based on the collaboration of Town and Gown. And Newark, New Jersey, and the surrounding areas as well, there are a lot of colleges and universities, but they're not necessarily connected with the neighborhood. And I wanted to bring awareness to that, because there are high-end schools that you would think and expect have some type of connection with, the children in the area, doing tutoring programs and things of that sort, but it just doesn't happen. I previously was in NJIT, which is New Jersey Institute of Technology, which is an engineering school. I was in their pre-college program from middle school up until high school. And that was the only program that I knew of that offered the relationship connecting with different neighborhoods. And that program was very enlightened. And that was actually the start of my interest of architecture. But that program was very enlightened. And now you don't see programs as such. And it saddens me because it enlightens students and even adults on what is there to offer. So my whole proposal was, connecting the two. And again, the mayor now, he has built this incentive areas to where as though he want you to live, play, and work locally. And we don't have a lot of that right now. Yes, we have a lot of public transportation. We have, we do have a lot, but there's no connection with it. So that was one of the things he proposed. And I wanted to basically enforce that and bounce off of that, of what else there is to offer from someone looking outside in. So of course, with my thesis studio, we had to do, site analysis, observe the area, and just observing the area. This is my old neighborhood. And observing the area, I didn't know half of the things I know now. Even when it comes down to some of the buildings that's surrounding it, we have the first Essex County jail, which still stands today, but it's abandoned. It still stands today, and I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with this movie, but it's the Malcolm X movie that Denzel Washington played in. That movie was actually filmed in this jail. And I didn't know that until actually researching it. And not only in this jail, but in Newark, period, some of the shots was filmed in Newark, along with how long these buildings have been up, and just understanding, yes, I grew up in this community, but again, there's not really much that is served necessarily to us. There's no connection. So I made sure in this project with my site analysis, I made sure that I built a connection even when it comes to the walkability. Everything is local, of course, everything you're able to walk in, but a lot of it serves car purposes. And that's what I tried to get away from as well. So a lot of my design was based on the walkability, the affordability, and making that connection and proposing different programs to embrace that town and gown so there wouldn't be any division. So these are the two main drawings. We were such in a rush time, but I did the best that I could with our renderings. And one of the main buildings that I was really focused on as well was my old elementary school, Warren Street School. It shut down due to academic sacrifices. Test scores and everything weren't up. So they had to, for a couple of schools, they had to combine them so that they could continue to, of course, get money from the state to, continue the education fund. It saddens me, but Newark has just been in a struggling time, and it is coming up, but it's been in a struggling time. And within Warren Street School, their yard is really big. And NJIT is now owns that 1 acre of property. They haven't really put out what is necessarily going to be there just as yet. I guess they don't want to frighten the neighborhood, but they haven't put out what they're going to develop it into. Unfortunately, the school would be torn down. It's been up since the 1900s. It's not considered historical. I thought it was, but it's not considered historical, so they're able to demolish it, unfortunately. But my proposal was to keep that building and renovate it for educational purposes. It was already an educational building, so I just felt it could continue to be served as educational purposes, even if NJIT was to own it within the city as well. And making a mixed use building directly next to it within that parking space and giving it green space as well. And I say that because if, you know, anytime you come to the United States, it's certain cities and certain states that offer the greenery, offer the walkability, offer the mixed use. Different neighborhoods don't offer that at all. So with me going in depth into my hometown and going from Newark to Virginia to South Carolina, seeing the difference between the three, I also seen the difference of what I can offer. Because in South Carolina, it's a lot in one. You have the walkability, you have the greenery, you have the mixed use buildings, you have majority of everything. Some of the buildings may not look the best, but you have everything that is offered. Virginia, you have majority that's offered. That's more so in between Newark and South Carolina. Newark, you don't really see that, and you don't have that. And that's why I appreciate the mayor now of what he's trying to do. He's really trying to make the city better. And my plan is to connect, you know, with them. But my sole purpose was to enhance the mobility, enhance the space, housing as well, because we're in a struggle of that, of affordable housing. And he also put in a program to where as though any developer that wants to create, you know, residential spaces, 25 to 35% of that has to go to affordable housing. Previously, it wasn't like that. Everything was market rate rent. So it's just been a lot going into New Jersey in general. And my sole purpose is wanting to create what I've learned from my graduate program, what I learned from Engelsberg. I want to incorporate all of those professional knowledge that I've learned to input that in all the work that I do. And just going to that program in the summertime really enhanced and helped me understand getting into my thesis document, because it was just certain things I didn't know about architecture that solely served a purpose. And even with the class itself, our professor was, of course, an architect, and it would be things that we were discussing. And he was just like, you know, I know you have it. Sometimes it's hard for me to show on paper, but the things that we discuss, he was just like, I know you have it. I know you have it. And I'm like, yeah, Engelsberg taught me that. Like, it just helped me in so many ways. And I greatly appreciate it. Even down to all of the students, you guys were like extremely helpful. It was times that I cried because I was frustrated, but you guys were extremely helpful, and it felt like a family. It felt like home, and I just wouldn't trade it for the world. I wish I could do it again. But overall, I just want to again thank y'all so much, and hope to see y'all and work with y'all soon for the plans I have.
Fabulous. We hope that too, Talia, and what a hugely impactful thesis. That's just wonderful to see where you are. Thank you very, very much. We'll move on. Vincent, I think you're up next.
Yes.
To get your slides going. Hello.
Yes, hello, and good afternoon from the Netherlands. I will just share my screen. Just a moment. Okay, well, hi everyone. I'm a musician and designer from the Netherlands. I've been active as a professional trombonist and composer and arranger for about 12 years. But on the contrary to music, my design career, or architectural design, has only taken off since I've attended the Engelsberg School. There was nothing happening before that, so that's already a huge impact for me. So next to music, I've always had a major passion for classical and traditional architecture. And in the province I grew up, Drenthe, in the Netherlands, I was always fascinated by the vernacular farmhouse architecture. This is an example from the village where I'm from, but also by the classical buildings in the nearby city Assen. This is the Joseph Church in the city of Assen, building from 1850. So this was always on the side. I always designed stuff just for fun, but it wasn't until 7 years ago or so that I really started to get curious and wanted to learn more about the secrets of classical design. And I got some books, and I also got into 3D modeling. And so I was trying to apply the things I learned in some 3D models. I was also starting to follow some contemporary, traditional, and classical architects, as well as the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art and INTBAU, which also learned me quite a few things. But I still had no plans other than to keep it a hobby. So I go to the next slide. In 2018, I started, for the first time, I started to share my designs and models online. And quite to my surprise, I quickly gained a following of practicing contemporary classical architects. And this was really a boost for me and a sort of affirmation to see if I could perhaps take a chance and see if there would be a career for me in classical design. And that's when I decided to apply for Engelsberg, which I already heard about because I've been following INTBAU for some time. And again, to my surprise, I was accepted, which I was just delirious. I was just, I said, what is happening? So this was already really a big change for me. And then arriving at the Engelsberg School was really a surreal experience, because up until this point, I'd just been doing this for myself as a hobby, and I never met anyone in person who had the same passion for classical architecture. So suddenly you're in this beautiful place in Sweden, surrounded by 30+ people who all have the same passion for architecture. And on top of that, I'm meeting all the tutors, and some of them I've been already following for some time online, and it was just it's quite surreal and hilarious, as I said. So during the summer school, there were opportunities for students to tell something about architecture, do a short lecture in the evening, and I decided to do a presentation on the models and designs I've done over the years, and this turned out to be a really good decision because shortly after, Christopher approached me if I want to collaborate on the book, which is now coming out, the Building a More Beautiful Borlänge, with turning some of the hand-drawn students' designs into 3D models, and also model the city of Borlänge in order to produce digital renderings for the book, really digital impressions. And of course, I said yes. So let me go to the next slide. What you see here is the cover. Morgan already showed it. The cover for the upcoming book, which this is modeled and rendered by me. And so what I've done is I've modeled the plan and also the buildings of Borlänge, the existing buildings, by using satellite images and street view and also photos. And then I put in the proposed student designs. So what you see here, for example, is the main square of Borlänge, Sveetoget, if I hope I'm saying it right. But on the left and in the background, you see existing buildings, which I modeled. And then on the right here, you see a library designed by Engelsberg student Thomas Giras. You see, go to the second slide. Well, this is just a picture of the existing square, which you just saw. On the left here, you see the building, which you also just saw, which I modeled. This is the existing library here, which is, well, let's just say it's a bit messy. Then we go on from almost the same perspective. Here is my model again, with the existing buildings here, and also here on the right side. And again, the proposed library designed by Thomas Giras. But this time, this render and also a couple of other renders are rendered by Charles Roberts Studios from the UK, which are far better at rendering than I am. And it was really a pleasure to work with them. And it was also just great to see my models come to life like this. So this is just a close-up of my model. And as you can see, this model of Thomas Pierre's library, but also some of the other models, I went to great extent to make sure to translate the drawings to proper 3D designs. And yes, it was quite some work, but it was also really satisfying. And I think the previous slide shows just how powerful an image like that can be. So this is a coarse image from my 3D program from the biggest model I've built for the book, which is the main street of Borlänge, Stationsgatan. On the right side here, you see the existing buildings. There's a bus stop along the road. And on the left side, it's a bunch of student and tutor proposals. So here you have a proposal by Christopher Liberatis' university annex building. This one, a university building designed by Cecilia McCammon. Here behind the trees is a park pavilion designed by me. And then here in the background are apartment buildings, mixed-use buildings designed by tutors Alan Struess and Russell Taylor, who I believe is also here. So hello, glad to have modeled your building. We go on. What a difference. This is again a render by Charles Roberts Studios. And again, I'm really happy with the job they did and make my models come to life. So we zoom in. Here you can see the park pavilion, which I designed. And I'm happy it got featured in the book as well. This is a rendering I done. As you can see, it's okay, but it's not nearly as good as Charles Roberts. So this is a park pavilion I designed whilst at the Engelsberg Summer School. And I made a 3D model of it in the rendering. This is the street elevation. And this is the park side elevation, which provides shelter for park visitors, and there's a toilet and space for a park attendant. So that brings me back to the book. Morgan, you already said, I think it's going to be available soon in December. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
for Christmas.
Oh, great Christmas present. So I think I've seen the draft, and I think it's not only a fantastic visual tribute to all of the students' work, but it also, I think it's going to be a must-have pattern book for any Swedish city, because it's just, there's so much visual input. It's very well done, and I'm really looking forward to the real book. Yeah, so that's sort of it on my behalf. I'm just really happy the way Engelsberg changed my life. I've learned so much, and I've made so many new friends and professional contacts. And the ways it changed my life. I mean, I've gotten this assignment, which was quite a lot of work, but I've also worked for Scala Architects in The Hague for the past year. I've worked with a stone sculptor in the Netherlands, and I've recently actually provided a lecture for Kingston University Studies in London. And I've also joined the board of INTBAU Netherlands, so I couldn't have dreamt that 2 years ago. So thank you again, everyone, for allowing me to be there and changing my life. That's it on my behalf. Have a good day.
Thank you, Vincent. Great. Another plug as well for the virtual exhibition that Morgan mentioned, which will be up on exhibition.intbau.org very shortly, and you'll be able to see more of these renderings on there. We'll move on next to Jofrid.
Okay, great. My name is Jofrid, and I'm from Norway and Sweden. This spring, I finished my architecture degree in Stockholm at KTH, and now I live in Norway and work in local administration. And on the screen here, you can see my 15 minutes of fame when I was on the front page of a Swedish newspaper, Svenska Dagbladet, when they did a reportage about the Engelsberg Summer School. And then to the right, you see a couple of details from the projects that I did there. Now, I have always been really fond of drawing, but when I was younger, I did actually not want to become an architect, partly because I found it kind of boring to draw straight lines, and also because I didn't really like most of what was being built at the time. But nevertheless, I did end up studying architecture in Stockholm in 2015. And as I've always been a huge history nerd, I loved older architecture and looked at that as a sort of inspiration from the beginning. And during my fourth year of study, I was in a studio that focused on architecture, history, and restoration. And I found that really inspiring and fun. And two of my classmates there were actually graduates from the Engelsberg Summer School, and they also greatly encouraged me to apply, and I did. Engelsberg was really great. It's a beautiful place, as you might hopefully see from some of my photos here. I learned a lot, and it's basically a very unique opportunity. It has a kind of magical boarding school vibe to it, and when I was reminded of it now and started thinking back, it was almost a bit hard to actually believe that it was real. So upon receiving the invitation to be part of this talk, I first actually thought, oh no, I haven't done anything relevant to Engelsberg. I won't have anything to talk about. But then I reflected on it a bit more and found that maybe I did have something to talk about after all. And when thinking back in preparation, I also remembered all of the ideas and the aspirations that I had at Engelsberg that I have not yet had a chance to take up, but hopefully still will in the future. So I sort of got a boost of inspiration there. So thanks for inviting me. The pictures that you see here are sketches from our study trips to Västerås and Stockholm. We did a lot of sketching at Engelsberg, and I did even more sketching on my own as a kind of process log of my own experiences and ideas. And I had this idea that I would sort of try to use these for some kind of project in the future. For example, I like to make comics. So that is one idea that I'm still considering, sort of making a comic either about the Engelsberg Summer School or more something that's related to classical architecture in general. In the autumn after Engelsberg, I would have preferred to do an internship to gain a bit of experience, but internships are few and far between, so in the end it was back to school for me. And in the studio that I ended up in during the last autumn, focused on various unbuilt projects around Stockholm. And what you see here is my reworking of Hans Asplund's proposal for the Vasa Museum. I did try to take it a little bit more in a classical direction, but also largely kept with the original design because I was quite fascinated with this architect. Besides my studies, I was also involved in the architecture school's Christmas bazaar last year. And then I got the idea to draw this little sort of booklet of how to draw the classical orders. It's called The Classical Orders of Architecture for and possibly by Dummies, that I made to try to sell to the students of the architecture school, hoping to sort of assert some influence. So it's basically a how to draw classical architecture manual inspired by everything I learned at Engelsberg. And once this spring began, I had to start my thesis project. And unfortunately, I did not draw this lovely church. It was already built. My project mainly dealt with sort of improving the site and connections around this church. It's a church that's close to where I'm from. And I also did a bit of work on this parish house from the 1970s that you see in front. Right in the middle of this project, after the mid-crit, the school sent us a message telling us to take home our stuff and don't come back to the school. Because the coronavirus had taken hold in Sweden, so they decided to just close the school overnight. And it felt kind of apocalyptic, of course. I guess a lot of people watching this might have had similar experiences. And then I moved back to Norway and finished this project sort of from the safety of my parents' house. And of course, in the end, this project was not that related to classical architecture. The only building part that I sort of added was this addition to the parish house, which looks exactly like the existing building. And in a way, I like to think of that as a kind of silent protest against this architect tendency to always wanting to make something completely new that stands out from what is already there. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is this student organization for traditional architecture and building arts that I have been involved in founding from this spring and onwards at KTH. And I believe we also have a chapter in Lund. One of my classmates from the 4th year had mentioned this idea already, that he wanted to start a student organization as a kind of a meeting place for students interested in classical and traditional architecture. And I, of course, was very interested in this. In February, we had a startup meeting before the school, of course, closed, and it was a complete lockdown, and all of our plans were just cancelled. But then we got together again towards the end of spring, and we organized everything over the summer, me and mainly 4 other students. I think some more were also involved. We got it up and running this autumn, and quite recently had our first lecture. And yeah, what you see here is our Instagram page. So if you're interested in what we'll be getting up to in the future, then please follow Stab Arkitektur. I'd like to say that I'm actually very happy about having been part of creating this, because it really feels like the kind of organization that I would have loved to have had there back when I started architecture school. So that was my presentation. Thank you. Thank you,
Jofrid. Wonderful. I think we all really want to see your orders for dummies in more detail. That looked fantastic. What a great project. We're going to come next, last but not least, to Nadia Everard in Brussels. Nadia, are you all set to show us some slides? You are, very quick.
So, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. Engelsberg was, I think, a very important moment in my life, and I think it was the same for most of the students, because it made me think differently, but also it's all the knowledge that Jenny, Christopher, and all the amazing teachers shares with us, and the network in which you enter after, because I think this is a very special thing with traditional architecture, is that there is not that much, I mean, maybe I'm too idealistic with this, but competition, like people really talk to each other, and if you have a question, they answer it quite quickly. So it's quite amazing to be part of this movement, very important to me. So I'm from Brussels, a city that is known for many destruction since the 19th century, urban transformation, the vaulting of our water canal, the Seine, not the one in Paris, but we have also a Seine in Brussels. And then in the 60s and the 70s, many places in the city has been demolished, following the principle of people like Le Corbusier. So we have some place in the city where there had been some complete tabula rasa, especially in the north part. So here you have 2 pictures, and it's something that you can see everywhere in Brussels. Beautiful buildings next to something that I will say ugly, and it's quite sad. So it's something that has touched me a lot, because I started my study in Brussels in 2016 at La Cambre, which is a university. It used to be 2 schools, 2 very, very good schools, and now it's not what it used to be. It's quite a sad school. and teachers are not there to teach anything, but to show, how do you say that, a fear to students, just so we pass our days to make models without any aims. So yeah, it's a very strange way to teach things. And the university, I think this is very sad too. Most universities in Brussels are in ugly buildings. And I think for architecture, this is very important to learn in a place that's, how do you say, you know, that reflects what you want to do. Yeah, so maybe you know that term Bruxellisation. I think it's used in some other countries. So it reflects on what happens in Brussels and something that is still happening. So on the right picture, you have this amazing building built in 1989. And just next to it, you have this kind of car park, which is an office building, which is just finished. It's empty because of the COVID. Most of offices in Brussels are empty. And most of the people in those offices, they are thinking of delocalizing the worker in smaller entities. So it's what's going to happen with those buildings. That's a good question. But so this building is office. It's not a prison. It's not a car park. It's office. So it's, yeah, and the contrast is just, it's crazy that something like that has been authorized in Brussels. And when you talk to the people in the city, so how do you say, the director of urbanism in Brussels, so I had a meeting with him weeks ago, and we asked how this could be authorized, and he just said that it's speculation. So very stupid arguments, and yeah. So they do nothing. Like the director of urbanism said that it was an ugly building, and we were just like, but why do you sign the permits for this kind of construction? But they have no arguments. I think it's just, I don't know how you say that in English, but money under the, yeah, maybe you can understand that. So this is the place where I started to study architecture. And at that time, during my bachelor degree, I had the pleasure to work at the Archive of Architecture Moderne, which was created in the 60s by Maurice Culot. So there I think it was the first time I was really learning something because I had to analyze old drawings from different houses in Brussels at the end of the 19th century. To archive things, and so I learned a lot about Brussels architecture, and at that time I also decided to do some craft work. So I worked with a stained glass artisan and also with woodwork artisan, because I mean university was so sad and I didn't learn anything, and I needed something more. I was really frustrated, and this is why when I finished my bachelor degree, I decided to go somewhere else, and so I went in London because my teacher was saying, yes, if this is not good for you, maybe you should go to that university, which was the London Metropolitan University in London. Which is good, and they are thinking about different, they are doing things differently, it's more practical, which is true. In England, university, you have less courses, it's more practical, true, and it's more linked also to the project, but it's not really different. I think it was, for me, the same. This is why also I was doing exactly the same thing. I was designing boxes for 4 years, and during my last years of study, I decided to do something differently. And I think this happened because I was doing another master degree, and I wrote a thesis on traditional architecture. without knowing that there were still architects, craftsmen, and urbanists working that way today, so in the modern time. So it was really nostalgic. I was really nostalgic of something I couldn't use in my daily work. And after that thesis, a friend who was a stonemason in London told me, you have to go to the traditional architecture group. It's great. There are architects doing that. So it exists. And so I went to one event where, so I met all this network, and it was quite amazing. And from this, I received an email about Engelsberg during my last year of master degree. And so I love drawings. I've drawn since I'm 6 years old. So, you know, going to a place where you can draw and you don't have to use computers, and where you meet people who think the same way, who like the same things too, even if there is some difference. I think this is amazing. And so Engelsberg was for me a great opportunity. I think one of the best experience I've ever had in architecture. And I met, I think, friends that I will keep for a very long time. We were sharing knowledge, learning together. So I learned for the first time how to design classical buildings, traditional buildings, and also learning about tradition in Sweden was really, really, really interesting, in a beautiful place. I think this is one of the very special thing about Engelsberg. It's some kind of paradise. It's true what Jofrid said. When you are there, you don't really realize that it's happened. It's beautiful. Teachers are great. Jenny and Christopher are amazing teachers, and we had like amazing conference from very, very interesting people like Robert Adam. After those conference, I started reading some books also from those people. So for me, it was quite amazing because I discovered a very different world going there. And it made me, I was really excited going back to Brussels. And I wanted to do something for Brussels because, so back from London to Brussels, nothing has really changed. And it's worse. The city now demolish buildings. They do facadism everywhere. So the situation is very bad. And I think it's the same everywhere in Belgium. And in the countryside, you have those, how do you say, you know, those dormitory city everywhere. So I was born in Brussels, but I didn't live there for 20 years. I lived in a small city around Brussels, which is called Kleinem. And it's not a city, it's a dormitory place with only housing, so nothing. So you are dependent on cars, so you don't know your neighbors. My parents still don't know them. So it's very sad area. And I think Engelsberg and also my thesis that I wrote when I was at university made me read lots of books. Yeah, people like Léon Krier, like William Morris, Victor Horta in Brussels, they made me think really differently, and it really opened my eyes. And going to Engelsberg, then you realize that, you know, it's possible to build that way. Because what was really interesting is to be in contact with those architects, also with those young practitioners. They give you examples of a place that exists, that have been built traditionally, like Panbury, Eulebrug in Belgium, more recently Cayala in Guatemala. So all those places, I think we need to study them, and I think it's quite amazing. So back to Brussels with friends. So since I was really young, we had a group at school, and we went to the library every day, and we had a small charter, which was called La Table Ronde, and we were the Knights of La Table Ronde. So this is something very old. And so we used to talk about what was happening at school that wasn't right, and what we wanted to change. And we were meeting every week around a round table in the library. And so some years ago, we talked about it with those friends who are from different disciplines. Some are in history, other in politics, architecture, but also in literature. And so we just decided to do something for the city. So what we did is to create an association in Brussels, which is dedicated to architecture, urban planning, and construction. But we talked about everything, which is not working, all the problems of the city and the countryside. And so first it was more like talking, like a small forum, and like by word of mouth, people gathers together, and then we became a large group in Belgium, young people mostly. And in August 2020, I decided to do something for the students in Brussels, because during the year, so 2019 and 2020, I was teaching to some students from Brussels University, but independently. It was really good for me because I could learn from them. I could learn from them, but also they were learning from me. So I had to learn many things in a very short time, which was a very, very good experience for me. And then I decided, because some students were asking to do group, study group. So I did small groups in 2020. And then in August, I organized a summer school in Brussels. Lucien Steil was supposed to come to teach, but with the COVID, I prefer to do just a small group. So there was 5 students and me teaching. And then also Emile Kuffel came during that summer school, I think for a day. I see you are here. And so it was amazing. So the students, there were between 15 and 22 from Brussels and from Paris. And they all wanted to do something different. So those who were at university, they wanted to learn traditional architecture. And the younger one, they knew they wanted to do architecture after, or they just were interested about it. And most of them were very good with drawings. So we spent days drawings in the city. I was doing some study tour at some place in Brussels that were very important for their architecture or for their history. Also showing the big contrasts between buildings in Brussels, between modernism and traditional architecture, and then we worked on a project together. So I designed the master plan, which is going to be published in September 2021, and hopefully there will be an exhibition. So I did a master plan for the new administrative center, which is called Brucity in Brussels. So they want to centralize all the administrative function in one building. It's going to be a no-fall building. It's going to be built. They have built already, I think, the ground floor, but with the COVID, it has stopped. So hopefully, maybe we will be able to do something. I'm not sure about it, but let's hope. So we did a counter proposal for this building with the students, So each student had a parcel and had to design it. So using tradition of Brussels, Brussels has a very large variety of tradition, but also of styles. Many things has been reinterpreted. So it's very interesting and a very it's a very good place to learn traditional architecture. So each student had decided different way of design, so different styles. They do a design with facades, plans, section, and they didn't finish after 10 days because we had planned many other things during that time. So what we are doing is we work during the year on it. So every 2-3 months, when it was possible, I was going to Paris, or the one in Brussels, I see them very often. So we work together on this. Some other people from other countries are also working on the master plan because it's quite a huge project. And yeah, if we can do something like in the book of Bornange, which is amazing, very, very exciting about it, that would be great too. And so La Table Ronde, so it's an association in Brussels promoting architecture, urban planning, and construction in traditional. And we did already organize some study tour. So at least this one is it wasn't in a quarry in Belgium, because bluestone is something that you can find very easily in Belgium. But what we also we used to organize every Thursday was a film session. We have a place here in Brussels where we can organize some events. So film session where students, but also other professionals came to talk about different topics. It was often related to the city. So for example, we watched La Grande Bellezza, and then we had a really nice discussion about it after. So it's very the activities are very different. We wish to do in 2021 some study tour in Barnbury, in Plessis-Robinson, and in Eulebrug. And also I organized some small study trip of 1 or 2 days in Belgium. And we have now a partnership with craftsmen in Belgium. So the idea is that the student of La Table Ronde, they do small projects with craftsmen in Brussels or in Antwerp or in Paris. So in those 3 cities, they do small projects like a door, a stained glass. But those projects, they are used in real buildings. So we offer something to the city. It's also good for the craftsmen because it's the students, they pay they pay the internship, and it's good for the students also because they learn how to use materials, how to use traditional materials. They do the design, we do the design together, and then they build it in the atelier. So it's very exciting. So at the same time, I'm working, and that's been, I think, because of Engelsberg. I had the opportunity to meet many people after, to talk to them or just to email them. And now I'm very close to Lucien and Colin Muller in Luxembourg, who used to work together. And I'm working with Colin Muller, not in Luxembourg because of the COVID, so I'm working at home. But for now, I'm designing a house in Alsace. Sorry, I haven't put many pictures, but I'm working on a design in Alsace. It's a house in a vernacular architecture. I hope you will be able to see something in the next month. The construction site is going to start in March, but it's my first project. So I'm very excited about it. It's not classical, so it's traditional, but it's vernacular. And we are using only traditional materials, so it's going to be lime concrete, wood construction. Yeah, so, and we're going to use this building as a place for the student to know how to use those materials. So they're going to learn how to use lime, how to use hemp. So I think it's going to be very exciting. So I would like to say thank you to everyone. Sorry if I have talked a bit too much. And sorry for my English. I'm trying my best. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Wonderful. And thanks really to all five of you. I think this, having been such a particularly strange year, makes it all the more just encouraging and really inspiring, the amount that all of you have somehow managed to do anyway, because of, in spite of. It's extraordinary. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. We're going to do two more things before we wrap up, and we do certainly need to wrap up in part just for Alex's sake, because it'll be 3 a.m, I think, in Australia, not very long. So next we're going to have our students ask questions to each other in a quick chain, so one to the next, and we're then going to come to questions from the audience. So keep typing those into the chat box, and my colleague Jules will then field those to our 5 alumni at the end. But first, Alex, do you want to lead things off with a question to Jofrid? I think you're posing to her.
Yeah, sure, Harriet. And still awake, so no worries.
Well done.
Yeah, so Jofrid, we've seen some of your great artworks in your presentation, and you're clearly a very talented artist as well as a classical architect now. So how would you say practicing your artistic skills has helped your practice and understanding of architecture? And could you tell us a bit more about the sort of link between those two skills for you?
Yeah, it was a really interesting question, because I mean, I've been doing art sort of so much longer than I've been doing architecture. So it's something that I didn't really sort of think about too much when I started architecture school. But I mean, one thing that I think has to do with how I sort of treat and view architecture is my background with comics, because there I often think a lot about like how the background influences the mood of the setting of the scene as being part of a scenery. So I think I often view architecture a bit similarly, like a kind of stage dressing in a way, such as how will this building make people feel? How will it influence the mood of the place, the feeling of the place? Also, of course, I've always been really fond of drawing, and from the start, and also I quite resisted starting to use AutoCAD and other similar digital tools, actually, because I really like drawing by hand. And I feel that it's like a gap in the digital tools that you have for drawing architecture, because that's also something that we learned at Engelsberg. We drew by hand, sort of the traditional craftsman way of doing architecture, while in AutoCAD it's like you click with the mouse or you type in some coordinates, and it really lacks the sort of spontaneity that you get sort of just directly having the thought go from your brain and out through your hand in a way. And I think it sort of makes it more difficult to be creative. And I think that with the technology we have today, it should definitely be possible to make a drawing program where you could draw using your hands, but also with the aid of the precision that you get through a computer. And also, lastly, I'd like to add that doing architecture has also actually greatly influenced how I do other artistic things. One person whom I've known for a while actually commented that my art style had become more clean and precise after I'd studied architecture a couple of years. And I think especially after Engelsberg, I think I sort of had that kind of classical inspiration that made its way into the backgrounds of a couple of little comics that I drew. So yes, I hope my answer wasn't too long. And I'm now going to ask a question to Leia, and I found your presentation to be really interesting, and sort of you spoke a lot about your journey, about your past and the past in general, as well as how you got to where you're now and how Engelsberg helped in that. So I'm curious about what are your hopes for your future, both career-wise and anything else?
That's a good question as well. So for starters, being that I just graduated, I just finished my master's program, and of course, within that time frame of COVID, we had to finish our program online, which was a bit hard. But since COVID has happened here in the States, you guys probably know and see it on the news, it's been really rough. And it has changed a lot far as, the environments politically, emotionally, mentally, it changed a lot. So after me graduating, I just moved back to my hometown about 2 weeks ago. Within that time frame, I had a lot of time to think mentally about what's needed, how things are changing over time, and basically more so what is going to happen. And I look at those perspectives professionally and personally. And my whole thing professionally of what I want to happen and how everything is going to go, my whole perception is to create and give new life and revitalize neighborhoods to make them better, because that's what something we fell on this side. You just don't see it a lot. And even when it comes down just utilizing the space, I'm very big on creating that space for people and not cars, and actually creating those beautiful buildings, those classical and traditional beautiful buildings. Again, you don't see much of that on this side. There's a lot of modern, crazy looking buildings you see, crazy looking spaces you see. And just my hope and dream is right now I'm planning, strategizing, and making my connections with different developers, different architects, and also different community planners to see where I can fit in to actually put out my creativity and let them see from a different perspective of what else can be offered. So I'm in the works of all of those things now, and I just got offered a couple different projects, so I'm going to see how those work for me. But I just want to create that new life and make things happen of how it used to be here, to where as though we have the ability, with those mixed use buildings, and just have the ability to live without depending on a car. I'm just really big on that urban feeling. So those are the things I want to get into for the future for me, because it's really changing with COVID and everything else going on in our politics. A lot of things are changing. So I want to make it better to where as though everyone connect in some kind of way. And to move forward, I have a question for Vincent. Vincent, you talk a lot about you being a professional musician, and I always wondered this as well. Did your path in music in any way influence your passion to pursue a career in architecture, classical architecture?
Well, thanks for asking. Actually, for quite a while, it didn't really. It was just a thing on the side. But actually, 5 years ago, I started studies in composition and arrangement. And part of the curriculum was learning classical counterpoint, harmony, and form. And one of my teachers pursued me to get into Renaissance theory on music. and I discovered that it is really closely related to classical architecture theory from the same period. So this really sparked my interest to do more research into classical architecture as well as in music. And for me at least, it was like the more you know, the more you want to know. And so the answer is well, yes. I mean, if that wouldn't have happened, my path would probably have been different. So well, thank you for asking. So I have a question for Nadia. And Nadia, I really admire what you have done since the Engelsberg School, all the activities, also what you've just shown. And something you haven't mentioned, and I saw you just did, is that together with your partner Noy, you have made a tribune, a manifest for publication, which is called "The World is Getting Ugly. What Can We Do?" It's very ambitious and very well written, and I'm just wondering, how did the going to Engelsberg and being at Engelsberg and getting the inspiration for Engelsberg influence you getting to this point where you want to publish something like this, and also what are you planning to do with this? That's my question.
Thank you, Vincent. I think we used to write a lot in French. My English is not as good. Yeah, my partner is working in geopolitics, but he's very interested about architecture and urban planning. So we start writing a few months ago, just about what was happening in Brussels, and then we should do something which is maybe more global. So we decide to write what we call in French a tribune. Maybe in English it's more like a manifest. So it's a text about ugliness, but about beauty also, and why beauty is not something which is seen today in contemporary construction. But it's also about the way we are building today. It's unsustainable. So it's not only about aesthetic. I think construction, I mean, this is why traditional architecture is interesting. Maybe it's a more global approach, because at that point we can really talk about ecology and durability. So what we decide to do with this text is to send it to professionals which are in the sector of construction, architecture, writers also, scientific, all kind of people interested in architecture, but professional, because the idea is to get to 250 signature for the end of December. So for now we have 88 signature from 24 countries. So this is really, I think, important. It's also to show that it's not a problem that we have only in Brussels, in Belgium, but it's a problem it's a global problem. Yeah. So I have a question for Alex. So Alex, tell me, what's the situation about new traditional architecture in Australia?
Yeah, so in Australia, no matter sort of how advanced we sort of think we are in matters of culture and architecture and stuff, we've still got a very sort of dismissive attitude towards ourselves as kind of like parochial colonials and all this sort of stuff. We've got something that's called the cultural cringe, by which everything that's sort of good or sophisticated or sort of up to date comes from a wonderful place we call overseas, otherwise known as Europe or the UK. So architecturally speaking, in many cases, we're still sort of, as many other places around the world are, kind of following Europe and sort of languishing in the shallows of movements like deconstructivism and parametricism and all these sorts of delightful movements. And the new sort of tectonic shifts that are going in the direction of traditional architecture are really only sort of just starting to sort of register on the Richter scale down here in Australia. And just like all cultures, we do have a sort of very rich tradition from which to build. And it's only recently that there's now constantly a growing number of traditionally minded architects, tradesmen, urbanists, and even town planners who are sort of starting to work towards a bit of a rediscovery of the nothing special but just perfect Australian classicism that's so wonderfully adapted to our you know, variable and very extreme climate. It's you know, it's a tradition that's been sort of supplanted from elsewhere into the Australian climate, and it's worked amazingly. And I've been amazed, like speaking to students and all sorts of different types of people and different professionals and things, just how amazed people are that this kind of thing can be practiced today. Most people, as was mentioned earlier, aren't aware that it's actually possible. It's just cognitive dissonance, and you encounter it all the time. So yeah, it's yeah, going well. Thanks, Nadia.
I'm going to jump in there and just say thanks, Alex, for that. We've got some questions from the audience, and we'll just have a couple actually, because we've run over by a fair bit today. But Alex, if you'll keep yourself on the speaker, I have a question from Caesar, who's asking, did you work on Revit or BIM software for the designs you shared? And that was a while back. That was the first presentation. And he's also saying, was it complicated to create the more intricate details typical to classical and traditional architecture?
The answers to those are yes and yes. Yeah, it's hard work, but I always start by hand. So my sort of artisanal master craftsman friends on the panel here as well can not shake their heads. But learning these skills that you learn at Engelsberg by hand makes things so much easier when using these technologies that we sort of have to use now in the modern sort of building industry, just for efficiency's sake. So, and there's no reason why they are just tools. There's no reason why you can't, you know, design the Parthenon in Revit just as you could with a pencil. It's just a matter of how many clicks you want to do to get there. But yeah. So the answer is yeah. We use Revit, but start with the pen. That's always my advice.
Thanks very much. Another question from Robert Adam to all of you. Robert's asking, do any of you find that your friends who are students or your acquaintances are curious about your dedication to classical and traditional architecture? And do some of them think that it's impossible today? Perhaps someone wants to speak first. Nadia, you're looking keen.
Yeah, so when I came back in Brussels, well, when I was in London, I think they see it like a hobby, you know, like some things. Yeah, I mean, those in modernist school or those practicing modernist architecture, they see it as something, you know, we are working with heritage. So it's like the same in Brussels. For them, we are working in heritage. It's not part of modernity. So this is something very difficult to make them understand. So, I mean, talking about the professional, but then when you talk to people, ordinary people, they are so happy when they know that people are building that way today. And it's quite exceptional because, I mean, in maybe 2 months, I had like many group talk with people. And when people know that they can build that way, they want it. So they ask, where are those architects in Belgium, you know? But the problem is that there is no offer. I mean, yes, we have some architects, but not a lot. So it would be great if more students would practice it to offer this beauty, you know. And it's not just about beauty; it's also a way of life. When I was living in, when I was young, when I was living in this dormitory city, I had no friend in my neighborhoods. And now I'm living in the center of Brussels. It's amazing. I don't have a car. I can walk, you know, to go to the bakery. I know my neighbors. There is a market. I can go every week. So it's important that people know that we can live in a different way. And people have never talked that much about ecology and durability. But the fact is that, you know, the academic and the media and all those people talking about about it. I think they didn't understand what those words really meant. And there is no, I mean, when you see modernist architecture, those last 75 years, it has not worked. So it's in French we say échec. It's a failure. So I think we need to go back to. It's not just going, you know, because for them, some of them, they just, you know, they are treating us as historicists, and they don't really. I think it's also they are kind of afraid about it, you know, because it's more difficult. Learning traditional design, it's difficult. It takes time. You have to care more about the city. You have to care more about the people also. So it's something completely different. And I think for young architects who just finished university, going back, you know, I think one person who was at Engelsberg, John, I think you're here too. It was amazing to see someone older than us, you know, having this courage of changing completely his life and wishing to do something better that he thought was better. But I think it's an exception. Most architects now, they won't change. So I think the only way to make things happen more quickly is to, it's not to force them, to force things to happen, but it's maybe to show that people, they want something different. So I think when we say we want traditional architecture because it's popular and durable, using the word popular, it's very funny to see that when we use that word today, people think that, you know, they directly think about populism, you know, but I think it's not bad, you know, to want to help the people, to build a better world, and also to think about the next generation, something that we don't do today. We just think about the last 15 years or so. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Does anyone else want to jump in on that question?
I can say something, just something short.
Please do. Yeah.
So with this, as I said in our presentation, architecture, urban design, urban planning, it's a little bit new to me. Of course, I always had interest in it, but actually learning it and learning the fundamentals, I was able to express that to, you know, my coworkers, colleagues, and friends, and it gave them a better understanding and also made them aware of their surroundings and understand the longevity of these buildings, and not only of the buildings, but the use. So they have gained interest. They don't think it's impossible. They actually yearning for more. And I say that because, and I'm just going back to my hometown because I'm home right now, and I just seen a lot going on since I left. The historical buildings that has not been in use. We have so many different mansions that has not been in use. And, you know, like I said before, we just go past them not thinking anything of it. And now that I made them aware of certain things, they are just like, oh my God, why haven't I paid attention to this before? Like, it's right in front of my face. And it's just like, it's beautiful. You don't see that every day. So I think it made them curious, it made them aware, and it made them like it more rather than the modern architecture we get now.
Thank you, Talia. I'm now going to share my screen with everybody because I'm aware that some of you had questions. So please do get in touch if it's about the summer school, if it's about INTBAU in general. If you're not aware that you can be a free member of INTBAU, go to our website and you'll find the membership page where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter. And you'll get updates about all upcoming talks. This is the autumn series, where it feels pretty wintry in London here today. We've got one more session left on that series. Thank you, all of you, and to Morgan and Harriet as well. I think that's all from us here. But yes, get in touch, and sorry to all of you whose questions we weren't able to answer. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a good day wherever you are.
Yeah, and good night, Alex.
And good night,
Yeah,
Alex,
good going.
finally.
Good night, Alex.
Yeah.